July 19th, a new attack on St. Petersburg and Moscow. The center of Moscow and St. Petersburg, Moscow city, has been blown up.
Boom.
Moscow and the Moscow region being attacked by Ukrainian soldiers. Boom, bada boom. By the way, where did you land? Something's burning over there. It's kind of strange here. Explosions were heard not far from Vnukovo airport. The carpet plan was put into effect there and evacuation began. Strategic airfields are under attack.
I've got a scoop. We've finally been waiting for this. Maliuk's response for Kyiv. All of Moscow is on fire. Terrorist attacks in the Moscow metro. Terrorist attacks in the Russian capital. Moreover, Shoigu has most likely been eliminated.
This is our traditional segment, Friends Sasha plus Dasha, and we're getting started. Top analysts, Oleksandr Demchenko. Sasha, welcome.
Hello, Dasha. Hello, everyone. Glad to see you.
Friends, please like this video. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let's get started.
Putin fears for his life. As for Putin's death, he doesn't even dream about, is afraid to even think about it. Half the Kremlin is working for the CIA. I'm more than sure of it. He already has a bunch of bodyguards who have long since betrayed him, given up all his coordinates, all his bunkers, all his secret and not so secret residences, all his apartments, all his rendezvous points with his mistresses. Absolutely everyone knows everything. Even without satellites, without traitor Musk Starlinks, they know it all. You asked me off camera. Sasha, who is going to betray Vladimir Putin? I'm telling you, his chief bodyguard, the one closest to his daughter, well, I'm exaggerating a bit, maybe Diamond, the man he elevated, the man he put in charge of Russia's defense industry, the man responsible for everything along Russia's borders. The man who oversees the FSB and a number of other agencies tasked with protecting the so-called border regions. Putin's chief bodyguard, his favorite Duman. His former favorite, the head of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, he's already buried him. That one wanted to stage a coup, but Putin buried him. He went into the mountain sand, died accidentally. He was holding the cameraman's hand and they both fell off the mountain together. That's it, the end. So I think that Putin is very worried about this, about the fact that he could be eliminated too. You understand that Shoigu and Gerasimov are just sitting there thinking, damn, this is a nightmare. They're not afraid because they're expecting retaliation from Maliuk. Not because they're expecting retaliation from Maliuk. They understand perfectly well, Dasha, that Putin could send the same kind of drone or scooter or something else after them. Shoigu walks around completely frightened. It's cold and lonely for him at the top. He told all of us about this live on Russia 1. It's cold and lonely for him at the top. He's afraid. He now walks around Moscow with 14 bodyguards. He moves around the Russian capital very little. He's been completely stripped of everything. Do you think he's not worried that Putin will eliminate him? He knows that Putin will eliminate. He knows that Putin will dispose of him at the most inconvenient moment for Shoigu. He's afraid of that. Gerasimov is afraid too. They're all afraid. And Solovyov, who says there will be an evacuation, get ready. Kyiv, get ready. Kharkiv, Odesa, Sumy for evacuation. We're just getting started. I don't know where Vladimir Solovyov will be evacuated to which Sharashka, to which prison. But I know for sure that very soon, the third phase of the special military operation will begin, carried out by Vasyl Maliuk and the Security Service of Ukraine. And it will be Moscow that has to be evacuated, not Kyiv. And in Moscow, I honestly don't even know what they'll be using to launch those drones. Maybe they've already rigged GUM. Or maybe they've rigged the Cathedral of Christ the Savior. Or maybe the Moscow metro will be set ablaze like fireworks for them. Putin has carried out terrorist attacks in the Moscow metro 4 times. What do we think? That they won't bomb the Moscow metro again? All of this has already been done by these Russian comrades. First, so many of these terrorist attacks, they will stage themselves. And second, indeed, the SBU is preparing. And not just the SBU, military intelligence, Budanov, Maliuk in short, they're preparing a whole series of surprises. Listen, Putin doesn't need all these extra people in the Russian Federation right now. He understands perfectly well that a black swan with a red crest is just flying over Russia, and he has no idea what will happen next. He's going to have major problems on Russia's southern border, and he doesn't have a backup army. Right now, in the Kremlin, they are seriously discussing a new wave of mobilization because they don't have any money. Reshetnikov himself told you, the Russian Minister of Economy, there's no money, we're in a recession, that's it, it's over, the end of the line. So what now? If there's no money, what's the way out of this situation? Let's just send this cannon fodder for free. After all, we pay for 3 weeks, and then they end up in the ground for free. There's a huge commotion, a massive blaze in southern Russia. The whole south will go up in flames. FSB. The Russian Federation border will be breached. There will be a breakthrough at the border. and hundreds of thousands will head toward Moscow. And what are they going to do? The FSB won't be able to handle it. The checkpoints won't be able to handle it. Everything will be burning, engulfed in flames. So what are they going to do? Create a second army, but they don't have a second army. Find some other forces and resources. They don't have any of that. Everyone is at war. Everyone is here. Everything's a mess. Is there any breakthrough here? There is no breakthrough at all. Well, they have nothing. That's all. They're stuck in a swamp. They're bogged down. So what do they do next? Nothing. That's why for him, well, he calls Trump every single day. He calls Trump. Why does he call Trump in tears and snot? It's like phone sex for them. That's what I'll call it. They have phone sex. What are they doing? What are they doing at night? He calls him at night, after all. It's like a striptease for the poor. Well, what is he talking about? Every single evening, every single night, he begs him in tears and snot. So Putin calls Trump, talks to him, and Trump at that moment presses the red button. That's how you should deal with him. Strike right in the middle of the conversation so he really feels it, so he understands what it means. Right? In the middle of the call, go out. Remember how he came out and said when he took out Soleimani, then al-Baghdadi, representatives of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, military commanders, and he eliminated the terrorists. How he got out of, and Trump, I remember this, during his first term, there was this viral video, a comparison with Barack Obama, who eloquently described what an amazing operation it was, how precisely it was carried out, that this was America's enemy. And then Trump came out and said, we killed him like a dog. We emptied all our magazines into him, found him, and then finished him off, kept shooting him even after. It was a nightmare, what he said. Can you imagine what will happen when Khomeini is eliminated? He'll come out, I don't even know how that's going to look. Putin will just be watching this and be stunned. He is very afraid of this scenario, very afraid. He's very afraid to get into a war, Vladimir Putin. Very afraid. On the side of Iran, he understands perfectly well that if he enters the war, it's the end for him. This whole pyramid he built with Trump, with Musk, with everyone else, it will just collapse. And he will never get America back. He will simply have to, as they say, come face to face with American weapons, with American missiles, and moreover with American military might in general, which will be thrashing him. Not only in Iran, but also in Ukraine. And who knows, it might even reach Moscow. When we talk about the special operations of Maliuk and Budanov, like the attack on Russia's nuclear triad, on the Pacific Fleet, the Northern Fleet, and the Black Sea Fleet of Russia. So I remember when Prigozhin was marching on Moscow and began to take control of possible Russian nuclear sites, people started asking him, why aren't you taking control of the nuclear power plants? Why aren't you doing this, Prigozhin? You could use that to put pressure on Putin. So if Ukraine starts certain special operations, could this become the beginning of the end for Putin himself? What do you think? The nuclear triad. Look, I've already said that if there's a repeaton or two more phases of such large-scale special operations, like a web, then Vladimir Putin will have to respond, and respond very harshly. But he has nothing to respond with. He's already shown his hand with Oreshnik. He won't use nuclear weapons, unlike Trump. You see, that one could actually go completely insane and press the red button. Vladimir Putin for now will not. So, here's the thing. Second, Vladimir Putin is also well aware that aside from mobilization, he has no other means to escalate the situation. Well, fine. Let's say he mobilizes someone. And then what? All these people need to be provided for. All these people need to be supplied with something. So what do we do now? What are we supposed to do with all this? And they don't have a backup. They've hit the ceiling. Kemzov came and said, well, we don't have any more money. The head of Rostec, we don't have any more money at all. We don't know what to do, how to provide, or with what to provide. Well, we can make Panzer systems, we can make anti-drone systems to protect you. We can't cover all of Russia. And as for that cannon fodder you're sending to the front, we don't really care about them, and we don't feel the slightest bit sorry. You've noticed, Dasha, he keeps sending his bodies to Ukraine. I've mentioned this more than once. He mixes the bodies of Russians with those of Ukrainian soldiers and sends them here to be buried, so there won't be any images over them, because they have nowhere else to send them to the families. It's easier to just say they're missing in action, or better yet, say he's still fighting, or say that communication is down over there. If these bodies, millions of them, are added to the hundreds of thousands already, all of Russia will be shocked, it'll explode. He doesn't want that. He remembers perfectly well the first Chechen war during Yeltsin's time, and the mothers of conscripts and the mothers of the dead. There was such an uproar. It echoed throughout all of Moscow, all the Kremlin. And Yeltsin gave in back then, but Putin, in this sense, has no intention of giving in to the mothers. So what, is he going to start shooting and hanging the mothers? He might. But then where will all this lead? In what direction? That's why I say the further he drags out this whole mess, the more he drives himself into a total dead end. That's the biggest problem for him, because he's just heading straight into a dead end. And there's absolutely no way out of this dead end. Whether Trump helps him or not, there is no way out. That's exactly why, right now, especially against the backdrop of the current events, terrible things are happening. We were just discussing with you this strike on Kyiv, a terrible strike. When that building in Solominka looks exactly, Google it. Friends like those photos from Kashirka in 1999, Moscow, the explosions, the terrorist attacks on Kashirskoye highway. It's exactly the same, just identical handwriting, the same terrorist attack, the same execution. The tools have changed, but the picture is the same, and most likely the same perpetrators. That's the first story. And now Odesa, an entire living building has been destroyed. Another building simply bombed. 600 people have been evacuated, left without homes, without apartments, without anything, out on the street. And at the same time, Vladimir Putin comes out at night, like Cinderella comes out in front of journalists and starts talking. Why at night? Let me explain. Because Beijing is asleep, Xi Jinping is asleep, all of Europe is asleep, and Trump has just woken up. We have a time difference, and Putin comes out and says, so here's how it is. We're going to communicate with Zelensky now. There will be an exchange of children. I'm going to bring the children back now. There will be a prisoner exchange. There will be a return to some kind of negotiation process, and so on and so on and so on. So what happens in the end? Why is he doing this? He's playing along with Trump. He's showing him, I'm ready for negotiations. I'm ready for Minsk 3. And Trump wants Minsk 3. That's why Lukashenko and Kellogg are making these trips. It's precisely for this reason. Because most likely, Putin is now playing along with Trump and saying that he'll talk to Zelensky, that he'll return the children, exchange prisoners of war, return the bodies, and discuss nuclear issues. That's exactly why, just like Cinderella, he deliberately showed Trump his video, came out to the journalists, and specifically for Trump, while it was daytime for him and nighttime in Beijing, it talked about wanting normal cooperation, ending the war, and communicating with Zelensky. And he says he's not against ending everything. Why? Trump wants Minsk 3. Trump wants a freeze. Putin didn't want that. But apparently, against the backdrop of Iran, he suddenly became very eager for this freeze in the military confrontation, the war between Russia and Ukraine. Or maybe he didn't really want it, but wanted to stage some kind of scene, some kind of fake, insinuation. And now Trump has sent Kellogg to Belarus so that Putin would also have some kind of certain involvement, some complicity in all of this.
Sasha, about Belarus. Indeed, as we discussed, there is a danger, first of all, of offensive actions from Belarus in the fall. Secondly, we didn't mention this before the broadcast, but it's possible that missile strikes on Ukraine from Belarusian territory could resume.
Yes, because right now, this is being reported by Belarusian railway workers. This is the partisan movement, as you know, which has been active since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So these guys reported literally just yesterday that entire trains are arriving. And inside these freight trains, there are aerial bombs and air-launched missiles, rocket munitions. Moreover, military aircraft are being brought in Russian military planes, are being transported to the territory of Belarus. So I do not rule out an escalation. I don't rule out maybe not an attempt at an invasion from the north, although even that can be excluded right now. But at the very least, I don't rule out bombings from the north, targeting Kyiv and other important strategic Ukrainian cities. Because Putin needs this, and perhaps Beijing does too, don't really know what the outcome was of the recent talks between Lukashenko and Xi near Beijing. Maybe Beijing also wants this, for Lukashenko to get involved in the war. Lukashenko himself does not want this. The Americans have probably received some kind of signal from the Belarusians. That's why Trump sent Kellogg, so that Kellogg could observe how Belarus was being attacked from 4 directions by NATO countries. But in reality, the reason is probably just one. Further escalation and the opening well, further escalation from Belarus, the threat from Belarus from the perspective of the Baltic countries, the farthest flank, the eastern flank of NATO. And on the other hand, there might even be escalation from the north if we're talking about the Russian-Ukrainian war. That's exactly why Kellogg is going. He won't be looking at any maps. And it's not because they want to revive Minsk 3, right? Although such proposals are probably still being made. But still, Americans aren't idiots, no matter how we might feel about what's happening. We need, to strip away a bit of the propaganda gloss, because propaganda is coming from all sides. I mean, from America, from Europe, and from Russia, each with its own character. But if we strip all that away, it's clear that most likely we're dealing with the fact that the Americans have once again detected some excessive Russian activity on Belarusian territory and want to slap Lukashenko on the wrist to prevent it. Whether they'll succeed or not is another question. But what is already clear is that American intelligence has detected something, and they're being helped by partisans who are on the territory of the Belarusian state. The question is how all of this will end. But I have always said that this Belarusian threat, especially now, during the upcoming Zapad 2025 exercise, they officially start in the fall. But preparations are already underway. So within the framework of these exercises, it is necessary to watch Belarus very closely and take any movement or even the slightest rustle on its territory extremely seriously, especially considering that Putin most likely wants to escalate the war and retaliate for Maliuk's special operation. And that's why we need to prepare for these different scenarios. It's better to be over-prepared than to miss something important.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Today, while preparing for our stream, I read from Alexander Nevzorov that, in fact, Trump's Washington administration convinced Trump not to give the green light to eliminate Khamenei. This had previously been agreed upon with Mossad, and because of this, a certain conflict is taking place. So Israel was ready to eliminate Khamenei, but people in the Trump administration who are pro-Russian are forbidding it. That's why Trump is hesitating. In other words, we're talking about Russian moles in the Trump administration. To what extent do you think this is actually the case?
Look, I believe that in America, within the American administration, there really are divided opinions regarding Iran, because one side does not support the war. We understand this clearly. This is Musk, this is Tucker Carlson, who in a sense control someone like J.D. Vance, their future candidate for US president. They've already said this openly. Musk has stated it directly. Exactly. That's the first point. Although, as it turns out, Musk is apparently a red agent for us. There are also some other people who Musk pushed into the Trump administration with his own money. But there are also people, the so-called hawks and strategists, who understand perfectly well that if Israel isn't helped now, there will be a major explosion in the Middle East that can't be stopped. And then it will be worse. They'll have to intervene, but the situation will be much worse than if they intervene now. And to destroy once and for all that Hydra, which has already spread its heads, stretched out its tentacles, and is reaching everywhere. But Dasha, I don't think Trump is hesitating right now because of whether or not to kill Khamenei. If we're saying that Trump is hesitating, then the statement by Israel's foreign minister looks very strange. He said directly, literally just yesterday, right after all these rumors, that yes, we are planning to eliminate Khamenei. Of course, Israel could have acted on its own. Netanyahu could have acted on his own and said, well, to hell with you, I'll decide for myself what to do with my enemy. We can't say that Israel is completely controlled by the Americans. No, the Americans have. But many things in Israel are decided independently, no matter what. This is a matter of Israel's survival. And when the question of Israel's survival arises, Israelis do everything on their own, regardless of any other decisions, demands, and so on and so on. But if everything is really like that, as they say, which I don't believe, then why does Putin call Trump every single day and ask him not to eliminate Khamenei? So most likely, Trump initially gave the green light to the Israelis. That means the Israelis are now, at this very moment, continuing to bomb Khamenei's shelters and bunkers for a reason. So this permission was given. If they're now trying to get Trump to backtrack, to use Margarita Simonian's words, that's possible. But it's another matter whether he will back down or not. After all, in America, there is both a strong Jewish lobby and a significant number of hawks in the Republican Party, as well as in Trump's inner circle. I want to remind you that there is one very important factor in Trump's entourage. If we're talking about Israelis, about Jews, that's Trump's family, where Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump, who converted to Judaism, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Trump's grandchildren are all Jewish. And most likely for them, it is extremely important that the issue with Iran be finally resolved.
Sasha, this is a very important point. When we talk about the elimination of Putin, yes, if we draw a parallel with the elimination of Khamenei, there are a number of scenarios. The first scenario is an overthrow from within, that is a coup d'etat, a military coup. And the third is a special operation like the ones Mossad is currently carrying out on Iranian territory. Which scenario do you lean toward as an analyst, a top analyst?
You can't say here. That's just reading tea leaves at this point, Dasha. There could be completely different scenarios here. Any of the first, second, or third scenarios, it's clear that the Americans have certain resources. They have certain means to destabilize the situation in Iran from within. Most likely, they have their own agents who are close to Ayatollah Khamenei. After all, it wasn't by chance that they once tracked down bin Laden, right? They knew, they approached the people they needed to approach. These people gave them up, leaked the coordinates of where bin Laden was, and he was eliminated.
I'm talking about Putin, not Khamenei, but Putin.
As for Putin, the Americans, obvious, first of all, the Americans have a huge number of their own agents around Vladimir Putin. These agents are corrupt. They're in it for the money. That's the first thing. And that's why Putin is afraid and constantly shuffles his deck of bodyguards. Second, obviously, the Americans know how Putin moves around. They have good satellite communication. They know perfectly well where Putin's bunkers are and so on and so on. But I think that if we're talking about Putin, the Americans will try to overthrow Vladimir Putin through the internal elite. They will do everything to ensure a coup d'etat in Russia in order to immediately change the government, because they won't want to allow a power vacuum after Putin is eliminated. They need someone to take power immediately so that as they see it, Russia does not then face the threat of disintegration, which would plunge the world into nuclear shock. I don't believe that this would plunge the world into nuclear shock, just as the collapse of the Soviet Union did not plunge the world into nuclear shock. Nevertheless, the Americans are very afraid of this scenario, just as they were in 1990 to 1991. And most likely, if they do anything, it will be the same as what they did starting in 1986, gently nudging the internal elite toward a coup d'etat.
We saw, I believe, at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, one of Putin's daughters spoke about life extension and these technologies. As I understand it, their goal is to do everything possible to ensure that Putin lives as long as possible. But when we talk about the special operations successor in Russia, or say when the elite will change, just recently Putin for the first time ever acknowledged the existence of his family, his daughters, for the first time, he actually said the phrase, my granddaughter is studying Chinese and so on. This is already a kind of preparation for the transition. And do you think that Vladimir Putin's daughter could become the new president of Russia?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Putin is preparing for a transition. I believe that Vladimir Putin actually wants to hold on to power for as long as possible. First of all, this isn't the first time he's talked about this daughter and this granddaughter who is studying Chinese. Considering that he once gave an interview to Vandenko before the war, by the way, a Ukrainian who I think works at Tassant. He's mentioned this more than once. Dasha, the question is something else entirely. The question is that Vladimir Putin's family is now receiving absolute power in Russia. We have already said many times that his younger daughter, Mariau, Katerina Tikhonovachas, gotten absolutely everything. Right now, they're digging into the Central Bank of Russia. They've already taken over the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Energy for themselves. They've gotten his family, represented by Kabayeva, and his best friend Kovalchuk. The Kovalchuk brothers have also gotten Kurchatov, and the Russian nuclear industry. They have also taken control of all propaganda in the Russian Federation. In other words, practically everything is now under Putin and his family. The most important security sectors, the most important energy sectors, and so on and so forth. That's why the role of the family has increased many times over. It's likely that the family is already involved in making appointments. Now, it's only the family that participates in appointing various individuals within the Russian power vertical. But the problem is that the Russian elite probably doesn't like this situation. Just as the Russian elite didn't like it when the family was in charge of absolutely everything in Russia. At first, they didn't like that Korsakov was running everything in Russia, right? He was Yeltsin's chief bodyguard, and Korzhakov was removed from his position. Then they didn't like that the family was running things together with Yeltsin. And the KGB came in and removed both the family and Yeltsin. And that's how Putin came to power. And now, probably someone won't like that Putin, together with the family, is running everything and has taken control of the common fund. So this will only further push the internal elite toward the split. If there's a major upheaval in Iran now, everything in Moscow will explode. They're just waiting there for a repeat of Prigozhin's coup. And that black swan keeps creeping closer and closer to Putin.
Sasha explained to us normal, reasonable people why Elon Musk is asking for political asylum in Russia. After all, Elon Musk's Starlink is currently working for the armed forces of Ukraine. This is very important. If he asks for political asylum in Russia, that would mean that enemy number one is providing us with Starlink, even if it's for money. That's even dangerous from a military standpoint. He could hand over his technology to the Russians, leak all of the information.
Well, first of all, he's already doing that together with Pavel Durov. As we know from investigations, they are helping the Russian general staff and the Russian army obtain necessary data on communications and satellite images regarding the Ukrainian army. So he's already working for them anyway. I have only one explanation. Actually, it's more of a hypothesis than an explanation. I assume that Elon Musk slipped up if he really was working for Russia or cooperating with Russian intelligence. And there have been statements about this from former FBI employees. They gave these statements recently. It was literally a leak to the German press. There were a number of interviews where former FBI representatives said that Musk met with Putin, cooperated with Russian intelligence, and that Russian intelligence had approached him. We don't know how successful they were, but maybe he was that very main agent in Trump's circle. And in general, in America, who has now simply disappeared, who was discovered, who they started digging into, and probably found out something. And scared, Musk is simply trying to run away, so to speak, to the motherland. From the very beginning, Musk's whole biography is full of obvious inconsistencies. How he made his first millions, how much his family was connected to Russia, how his family was connected to the Nazis for a certain period, and so on. Everything there is full of obvious inconsistencies. There are a lot of gaps in this biography. Did he communicate with Russians or not? And in general, what business interests did he have regarding the Russian Federation? How many times did he meet with Putin? What did they talk about? And so on. Who exactly from Russian intelligence approached him? And in which years? There are a lot of questions for Elon Musk. And if he really felt that the entire American security apparatus, the whole American power structure, started digging into him, he could have gotten scared and calmly asked back home, so to speak, in his so-called collective homeland, in Moscow, get me out of the US quickly. I've been exposed. I failed. That's also quite possible. Can you imagine? Musk is a Russian illegal agent. Now, that would be a huge scandal. The right hand of the US president, the Russian illegal agent. But if that's the case, it would be Putin's and Russian intelligence's most successful operation in decades.
Yes, it would be a total disgrace for America. Sasha, I can't help but ask you as we wrap up about the drones. So, a military specialist in radio technology, Flash, stated that Russia is already producing more than 5,000 Shaheeds per month, and that's not even the limit. Next, North Korea is sending 25,000 workers to Russia to manufacture Shaheeds. Well, this is a very serious challenge for the armed forces of Ukraine, because in the drone race, Russia, unfortunately, is currently winning, and we need to do something about it. And I have read what military analysts are saying. Everyone says that a bloody autumn awaits us because Putin will simply bombard us with drones and destroy us.
Well, it's obvious that he will bombard us with drones and missiles and try to destroy us. He has no other options because his entire summer campaign will eventually stall. He doesn't have enough forces and resources to capture major Ukrainian cities. We know this perfectly well, Dasha. And it's not for nothing that Maliuk, Ukrainian military intelligence, and the armed forces of Ukraine are now pounding deep into the Russian rear, destroying railways, logistics, and so on and so on. We've talked about this many times, but I'm not an expert in drone technology, military affairs, and so on. I'm not a military analyst or a military expert. But what I clearly understand is that if Putin is bringing in 25,000 North Koreans to a factory in Yelabuga, Tatarstan, where the Iranians have built him a facility for producing Iranian Shahed drone systems. That means Putin actually doesn't have enough drones or enough people to mass produce these drones. That the plans for drone production in Russia are not being met. That's why there's help coming from North Korea. So what's next? What is the second conclusion I come to? I come to the conclusion that Ukraine, without the help of the West and Europe, also won't be able to handle the drone war on its own. This means that Europeans need to speed up, stop dragging their feet, and start churning out drones. They need to start producing drones and sending them in large quantities. And set up factories on the borders with Ukraine to speed things up. Set them up deep in the Ukrainian rear for the same reason. and send a huge number of drones to Kyiv and other command centers so that these drones can be launched by the Ukrainian armed forces towards Russia. But there's another point that's extremely important: anti-drone systems, which Ukraine desperately needs. Here, the issue is not only with the Ukrainian defense industry, which is already overwhelmed with orders, because it's clear that demands are pouring in from all sides. Everything absolutely needs to be modernized, created from scratch, and completely restructured. This is also a question for the West. The West needs to wake up and provide these anti-drone systems. Frankly speaking, Trump really messed things up when he took and handed over 20,000 of these anti-drone systems to Israel. It's clear why. They need them there right now too. They've been preparing for this Iranian attack all these past 2 months. But at the same time, Ukraine remains a crucial point for Europe, primarily for Europe. And Europe simply needs to wake up. In my opinion, I'm just stating obvious truths, axioms that everyone already understands.
Friends, Sasha and I always appear on my YouTube channel, Dasha with the toponymy of Oleksandr Demchenko. Sasha, our audience always asks you to end with some optimism regarding the new special operations of the Vasyl Maliuk and the GUR. Please, Budanov, the floor is yours.
There will be special operations. Several phases are still ahead. This will be large-scale, massive operations carried out by Ukrainian forces. Zelensky, Maliuk, and Budanov have broken free. Remember, after the last time when there was a terrible strike on Kyiv, by the way, and on Odesa, there was a special operation by Maliuk against the Pacific Fleet. Ukraine struck, hit the strategic bombers, hit the Crimean Bridge. Expect more large-scale operations soon. I don't know what will be burning. Will the mausoleum burn along with the Kremlin and Putin? Will the Baltic Fleet burn? Will something else on the territory of the Russian Federation catch fire? Maybe Kaliningrad will blow up to hell, but I clearly, perfectly understand, Dasha, that there will be special operations. Maliuk, Zelensky, Budanov, they've all broken loose, and there will be retaliation. There simply isn't any other option here. Because for Vladimir Putin, despite all his wishes, all his supposed attempts to talk to Trump, to negotiate some kind of talks, to show Lviv, to return the children, and so on and so forth, he has only one desire: to turn Ukraine into one big, massive explosion. To create one big straw that breaks the camel's back, to completely destroy all of Ukraine and Ukraine, to carry out a major purge. And there is simply no other way here. It's either us, or they will simply wipe us out. That's why there will be special operations. Military destruction, rear area destruction inside Russia, so that the summer offensive chokstis will happen in the near future. And the black swan will come to Putin, and for Putin, whether Vladimir Putin, Solovyov, or Trump like this beauty or not,